What if Jon Snow left the Night's Watch and joined Robb Stark, Part 2? Let's explore the depths of it in the video. To christen the rebuilding of Winterfell, a wedding is held in the Godswood, which northern lords and new wildlings are invited to attend. This is the product of long hours of negotiation between Robb, Catelyn, and Littlefinger. As promised, Littlefinger has sent Sansa home from the Vale, where she reunites with her family. While grateful for that, the Starks are far from convinced. Even Catelyn, who grew up with him, begins to have her doubts. However, the armies of the Vale are too important to ignore, and they reluctantly agree to this marriage proposal, albeit with different terms. As his overlord of the Riverlands remains with Edmure, any children will not supersede lordship over the North, Riverlands, or Eyrie. Their ruling houses shall still be the Starks, Tullys, and Arryns. Littlefinger gladly agrees to these terms, and Septim is called and organizes the ceremony. However, it is a quiet affair, as people seem less inclined to celebrate, chief among them Catelyn, who does so with great reluctance. Yet Peter remains oblivious to this as he smiles and regards his bride.
I'm going to scream when I make love to my wife. I'm going to scream so loud they'll hear me across the narrow sea.
Later that night, Robb Stark tries to ignore the screams as he considers his next move. To his surprise, things have been quiet from his southern border as Lord Tywin followed Joffrey to the grave. Robb already sent some river lords by the Blackfish to begin fortifying and strengthening the Riverlands for a possible invasion. Unfortunately, with the Reach now on the Crown side, not only are they outnumbered, but they can invade from 3 areas. Littlefinger soon advises Robb to visit the Vale to personally meet with the lords there to thank them for their help. Though he is no longer master of coin, many merchants and businesses he has dealings with still have ties with him. For that reason, he suggests using that money to rebuild the Riverlands. Meanwhile, the rule of the North is left to Sansa and Jon Snow, who is aided by Mance. Jon Snow is now only an overseer of the wildlings and doesn't hold any titles. In the Vale, many lords were anxious to join the War of the Five Kings. Jon Arryn's love for Ned Stark and Robert Baratheon is well known, so they are eager to join his son. They readily agree and begin assembling their men. One portion of this army will go to the Riverlands to help stabilize it, but Littlefinger suggests sending another portion elsewhere, the Stormlands. Though Littlefinger is no general, he understands chaos and sees the death of Stannis and Renly Baratheon leave them without leadership. While they are sworn to the Iron Throne, he points out their loyalty is not solid. A bold strike there might potentially cut the Westerlands in reach from the Crownlands. Meanwhile, in the north, Jon continues his attempts to settle the wildlings across the region. In his efforts, he's joined by Mance, Arya, and Sansa. The former king beyond the wall proves to be useful in bridging the gap between the free folk and Northmen, helping assuage quarrelsome chieftains and giving them a voice in the ruling. But to everyone's surprise, Sansa and Arya prove to help win them over. Arya is sent to be fostered by Tormund Giantsbane, so she may learn to become a spearwife. Sansa's courtly training and singing voice can win other chieftains over. In a land of desolation like those beyond the wall, songs are among the few joys they have, and her singing voice is nearly as effective as the diplomacy of Jon Snow. Jon Snow, being highly respected across the north, makes the Northlands more willing to cooperate. Together, they teach the wildlings smithing, allow their children to ward in great houses, and conduct trade that improves their standards of living. As a result, raiding becomes less common. They also receive letters from Robb, which provides them regular updates on events.
Robb writes that Littlefinger has convinced the lords of the Vale to send us aid. The Knights of the Vale will ride under Lord Royce's banner and to reinforce his position in the Riverlands. Lord Baelish will soon join them to help rebuild the realm.
The Vale's knights are some of the finest in Westeros. If Robb has their backing, it's no small thing.
Aye. Another debt we owe to this Lord Pinkyfinger.
Littlefinger, Lord Raider. What do you mean?
No small thing, aye. But it's worth asking. Why would a man like Baelish help your brother? Where I'm from, men follow deeds, but also the promise of loot, weapons, gold, and women. A man like him wants something from his king.
Sansa, you live with Lord Baelish. What sort of man is he like?
Littlefinger saved me, Jon. He freed me from King's Landing, and he kept me safe from Lysa and the Eyrie. Without him, I might still be at Joffrey's mercy, or worse. But I know he is not popular in the Vale. He claimed his reward. He married our mother. He admits he's always loved her. Surely that is payment enough.
For the Knights of the Vale. But he says he's heading to the Riverlands to help rebuild it. Isn't he no longer Lord Paramount? Why bother leaving his new lady wife to head to a domain he does not even control?
Perhaps to curry favor? I'm not certain either. But all I know is that I'm free because of him.
Free, are you? Sometimes the greatest cages are the ones you don't see. And Lord Baelish strikes me as the sort to weave them tightly.
I know he saved you, but we must ask. Did he do it for you? Or himself?
Meanwhile, Robb's campaign in the south begins. Young Royce reinforces the Blackfish's army in the Riverlands. The knights spread out to halt a possible Tyrell incursion. They make no secret of this advance, having the knights riding from village to village, where they are greeted by cheers from the war-weary smallfolk, especially Jan Royce. The advance of the Vale and northern forces is as much a display of strength as a campaign of liberation. Villages once ravaged by raiders and Lannister forces erupt in cheers at the sight of their approach. Peter Baelish, however, is met with none of the same warmth. Yet this suits him perfectly. He bypasses the pomp and ceremony, traveling directly to Riverrun, where Edmure Tully holds the castle, leaving the glory of battle to Royce and Robb Stark to solidify. Jan Royce and Brendan Blackfish Tully assemble their forces on the outskirts of Maidenpool, where the Lannister-aligned forces of Randyll Tarly are. Thanks to their knowledge of the terrain, the Blackfish manages to cut off the other passes in a series of lightning strikes, keeping the other towns and castles held by the Lannisters cut off and unable to assist the garrison of Maidenpool. While the Valemen attack from the walls, they face fierce resistance from the Royalist host, and a bloody battle ensues, claiming the lives of many from all sides. But knowing that relief is unlikely, Randyll Tarly decides to slip out at night. The victory is decisive, and Royce wastes no time pushing further west. Small castles and villages are each liberated one by one. Even Harrenhal is swept up, as Royce's army seizes the fortress with little resistance, and all the Mountain's men are put to death. Meanwhile, Robb Stark, landing south of the Riverlands, wages a guerrilla campaign in the Stormlands. As anticipated, the Lannisters have left the region lightly defended. Robb capitalizes on this, striking at supply lines, ambushing patrols, and targeting loyalist strongholds. Houses once sworn to the Baratheons see Robb as their only hope of resisting the Lannisters, as he is the last true beacon of Lannister resistance. A few small royal armies go to confront Robb, many of them weak and poorly led, as the capital is in chaos, not just from the death of Tywin, but a new plague, the Sparrows. Somehow, through some mad plot, Cersei manages to convince them that Marjorie is guilty of fornication, but ends up being arrested herself. With both queens on trial, the situation seems ripe for chaos, which allow the rebel forces to thrive. Robb manages to secure a foothold in the Stormlands, with his allies capturing Storm's End at its base. But the one who thrives best in this chaos is Littlefinger, who directs his attention to rebuilding the shattered Riverlands. Peter visits towns and villages, repairing burned-out septs, ruined farms, and distributing food to the war-weary. His efforts are carefully crafted to court both the smallfolk and the faith. Word of his work reaches the High Sparrow, a new and high septum in King's Landing who grows increasingly critical of the crown's extravagance. Littlefinger sees this as an opportunity. Already he's managed to ensure that his hold on the Riverlands and the Vale grows. While the lords might initially cheer Jan Royce as he rides through their villages, it is Littlefinger they will remember who rebuilt their farms. In the Vale, he made sure that when the armies marched out, those lords opposed to him were sent out. Men from Redfort, Waynwood, and Hunter are among those in Robb's armies, while Jan Royce is leading his troops out west. This leaves only the Templetons, Corbrays, and Belmore in the Vale, those who are theoretically opposed to Littlefinger, but who he can buy or befriend. And so long as Lord Nestor holds the Bloody Gate, he can cut off the Vale army if necessary. Already, the presence of Catelyn Stark caring for Robert has put some lords at ease, ensuring his hold only grows. This is so much so that he manages to arrange a meeting with the High Sparrow in an old sept at the border of the Riverlands.
Lord Baelish, you've made great efforts in rebuilding the septs in the Riverlands. A noble work, though I wonder,
What does a man of your reputation seek from the faith? You speak of loyalty, yet you serve a pretender. The boy who calls himself king in the north denies the rule of the Iron Throne and defies the faith's authority. And yet it is not his mother being charged with incest and fornication. The boy you speak of, Robb Stark, has brought peace to lands ravaged by the lion's claws. But you are correct. The north is filled with heathens. Wildlings who bow to no god. Northmen who worship trees, and old gods long forgotten. This is a blight upon the faith, one that must be remedied. I can arrange for septums to accompany my trade ships, spreading the faith's light as they go. Perhaps even a contingent of faith militant to safeguard their mission. Do this, and you will have my support. But remember, Lord Baelish, a man who serves only himself will find no solace in the Seven. Your works will be judged, not by me, but by the gods. There is one more matter to consider. I understand your misgivings about Robb Stark and his faith. However, his sister is a follower of the faith, trained by one of your scepters and knowledgeable in all the passages.
Robb's string of victories in the Stormlands bolsters his position. Mace Tyrell rallies an army of 20,000 men to march south. Though his wildling forces raid and ambush the enemy forces along the woods, they only slow them down. Robb gathers his forces, scraping up every soldier he can find and looking for a good spot to ambush them. Scouts bring alarming news. Another force has landed in Westeros. The Golden Company was led by Jon Connington. Their forces strike swiftly at the Stormlands, capturing castles along the coast. Without a direct land route, this could leave Robb Stark stranded south. Realizing the danger, Robb abandons plans for an immediate offensive against the Tyrells and redirects his armies south to Storm's End, one of his remaining holdings. He just barely beats the Golden Company, who soon begins besieging his forces. In the meantime, the cold air whips through Winterfell as Sansa takes a break from the meetings and petitioners. All of them come with the same complaints about the faith of the Seven and the faith militant. Sansa knows the arrival of the faith has only stirred resentment. They arrive from White Harbor and spread to all the camps and villages across the land.
A sight to behold, isn't it? Faith marched into the north, clad in steel and draped in righteousness. Hardly the warmest of welcomes, I imagine.
What are you doing here, Lord Baelish?
I've come to see you, my lady. I've been quite busy, as you can imagine, arranging for these good septums to make their way here. A favor for the High Septum, and in turn for your brother. Though I hear their arrival has not been entirely welcomed.
No, it hasn't. The wildlings and many of the northern lords feel their beliefs are under attack. The fact that the faith comes armed only worsens the tension. This is not a land that bows easily, especially not to southern gods. Is all of this truly necessary for the Vale?
No. The vision has changed. The potential of this situation is greater than anyone else can imagine. Things in the south move quickly. Soon this war will reach its climax. And why settle for the north and Riverlands when all 7 kingdoms can be yours?
How can that be?
Squabbles grow and madness reigns in King's Landing. I do not ask you to endorse the faith, merely play along. When they arrive, recite all the verses your scepter taught you and nod along at their sermons. When this is all over, you may find yourself wearing a crown.
But as Littlefinger takes his leave, Sansa goes to her brother Jon. She warns him of his threat and tells him about what Littlefinger may do. Meanwhile, Jon Snow is already conducting his investigation that takes him to the Night's Watch. Despite weeks of siege, Storm's End remains defiant, as the Golden Company hauls trebuchets, rolls up siege ladders, and elephants try battering the gates. Robb is in the front, leading his men to fight off attackers. He appears wherever he is needed, with Greywind by his side, tearing at men and frightening horses. Though supplies are dwindling, morale remains steady as they face attack after attack. Robb does not remain idle, sending out men to launch guerrilla raids, striking under the cover of darkness. All the while Mace Tyrell marches with the host, outnumbering both forces. But while Robb will still have his walls, the Golden Company risks being caught under two forces. As the sun sets, a rider approaches the castle under a banner of truce. Robb and his commanders meet in the Great Hall, where Jon Connington stands before them.
Lord Stark, your defense of this castle is admirable, though misguided. You fight a war you cannot win. If you hold us here, the Reacher's armies will arrive within days, and you will be crushed between them and us. Not before your men water the stones of this castle. Storm's End has stood against greater odds than this. If you think this is the end of our conquest, you will be mistaken. I have heirs, and the Riverlands and Vale. I do not doubt your courage, Stark, but courage will not feed your men, nor break this siege. You are king without allies. Lay down your arms, swear fealty to Aegon, and I will grant you terms benefiting your station. And what does your king have planned for the Seven Kingdoms? To rule, as was his birthright. He is the son of Rhaegar Targaryen, rightful heir to the Iron Throne. That right was lost to him when his grandfather began burning people, my kin included. Your anger is understandable.
Jon hesitates, realizing his strategy isn't getting to him. Taking a deep breath, Jon decides to take a different approach.
Perhaps the matter of kinship doesn't need to be settled now. The situation is volatile, and if we fight here, then there is a chance both our causes might be lost. Perhaps we could come to an understanding later on, once we have dealt with the Lannisters. It seems like that is the one point we can agree on. Aye. What do you have planned? Something incredibly bold, or incredibly foolish.
The sun rises over Storm's End, revealing the golden banners of the Golden Company.
It seems like the sellswords wiped out the wolves for us. If they mean to keep the castle for themselves, let them try. We'll have it back by the day's end. Bring up the ladders. Storm the walls. Let the usurpers know that the Reach does not falter.
The siege begins with brief bombardments from mangonels that rain down stones on the stone walls. The defenders on the wall respond with a rain of arrows that cut down the nearest attackers. Dozens of Reachmen try to rush forward, bearing ladders under fire. Despite the losses, they surge forward and bring the ladders crashing against stone. Within minutes, Reach soldiers swarm toward the walls like ants, hiding under their shields. Defenders rush to meet them. A few ladders fall over, while others have their defenders cut down. It slows their advance, but does not halt it. Mace's confidence grows as the first of his soldiers crest the wall. But then a shadow moves within the melee. Robb Stark bursts forward as he cuts through the Reachmen like a whirlwind along the groups of the North and Valemen. Greywind snarls and tears into the unprepared soldiers, ripping throats and sending men screaming off the edge. The battlements erupt into chaos as more Northerners emerge from hiding in the towers, slamming into the Tyrell forces.
The wolves are still here! What treachery is this?
Before his commanders can answer, a horn sounds from the tree line beyond the siege camps. The sound is unmistakable, a battle call, deep and ominous. Mace's blood runs cold as the forest seems to come alive. From the woods, Golden Company warriors surge forward, their disciplined lines tearing into the exposed rear of the Reach army. With mercenaries at their back and Northerners on the walls, the Tyrell host is trapped. Panic ripples through the Reachmen as Jon Connington himself rides out at the head of the Golden Company, cutting down men as around him the cavalry smashes headlong into the flanks. Mace's commanders shout orders to regroup, but the field is already a slaughter. Mace watches in horror as his proud banners are trampled underfoot. On the walls, Robb fights with the fury of the North, Greywind at his side. The combination of his swordsmanship and the direwolf's savagery carves a path through the Tyrell troops who scramble down to find more foes waiting for them. The Reach army is breaking, its men fleeing in all directions. The Golden Company pushes forward, driving the rout further. Mace Tyrell, now surrounded by a dwindling number of his bannermen, finds himself cornered. His horse rears, its hooves pawing at the air as mercenaries close in. He shouts for his men to stand firm, but his words fall on deaf ears. Connington himself rides up, his sword leveled at Mace.
Lord Tyrell, your army is broken, your men scattered like leaves in the wind.
Surrender now, or die here in the mud.
Very well. I yield.
The battlefield falls silent as Robb Stark descends from the walls, bloodied but triumphant. He strides through the wreckage towards Connington, who dismounts to meet him.
Well fought, Stark. You played your role to perfection.
And you delivered the killing blow. Let's hope this alliance holds until King's Landing.
Greywind pads to Robb's side, his muzzle red with blood. Robb sends word for Jon Royce to advance further south. Now with the Golden Company by their side, they have the numbers to risk open battles and begin advancing up the King's Road. The heavy wooden doors of the Great Hall of Winterfell swing open with a groan, revealing Peter Baelish, who hurries to meet with the northern leaders. Jon Snow is there, flanked by Sansa Stark, and surprisingly, Catelyn Stark.
My lady wife, I'm surprised to see you here.
Only to hear your treason. Your efforts in the Riverlands are not why you're here.
Reports have reached us, Lord Baelish. The Faith militant has been stirring unrest in the north, clashing with wildlings and even some of our bannermen. When I sent men to arrest them, the men of the Faith were allowed to come under your authority.
My lady, I assure you, I merely allowed a few septums to preach the Faith and their guards. I indeed chartered their ships. It was part of an agreement to secure the support of the High Sparrow, a small price for the alliance we need to hold the Riverlands and—
Hold the Riverlands? You hold no authority here or in the north to make such decisions.
I acted in good faith to secure your family's position. The Riverlands and the Vale, even parts of the south, all must be united if we are to reclaim the Seven Kingdoms. Surely you see the wisdom in this.
The North was never yours to barter. You've sown unrest, and people have died because of it. You've overstepped. What makes you think we have an interest in the rest of the kingdoms?
Overstepped? My dear boy, all I've done is pave the way for a stronger claim. These wildlings you've brought south of the wall, they're the ones stirring trouble, resisting the natural order. The Faith merely—
The Faith came armed, Baelish. Armed and uninvited. Armed because you permitted it.
Yes, I confess, I allowed them here. But there is no treason in allowing a few septums and their guards here. If I overstepped, I shall gladly make amends. But there is no treason in that. I have only served your family.
Is that so? Because I have someone who can say differently.
Before Littlefinger can reply, Janos Slynt steps forward, flanked by two black-cloaked members of the Night's Watch.
Lord Slynt, is this the man you spoke of?
He came back to King's Landing. Tried to bribe me in Ned Stark's name, but then whispered to me, yes, he did. Doubled if I turn against him. Said it was for the good of the realm. Yes, he did.
The hall falls silent, the weight of the accusation hanging heavy in the air. Littlefinger's practiced smirk falters momentarily before returning, though weaker now.
This is madness. A man's crimes are washed away when he joins the Watch.
His crimes, not yours. You sold out my father, and then turned against the Iron Throne. That makes you twice as treasonous. Your actions led to the death of Northmen and wildlings alike. You made deals in our name, behind our backs.
Guards step forward, seizing Littlefinger by the arms. He doesn't struggle but looks towards Sansa with an almost pleading expression.
Sansa, Catelyn, you know me. Everything I've done, every step I've taken has been for you, to protect you.
You did it all for yourself, Peter. Winterfell is not a piece on your board.
Littlefinger's eyes flicker with panic for the first time as the guards drag him away, his voice echoing through the hall.
You need me. The game doesn't end here, Sansa. Without me, you'll never—
The doors slam shut behind him, leaving the hall in heavy silence. The next day, the guards bring Littlefinger out, where he is beheaded by the guards. The only protest that they get from the Vale Lords is that they weren't there to witness it themselves. In the south, King's Landing is ripe for plucking. The few defenders, soldiers loyal to Cersei Lannister and scattering mercenaries, offer sporadic resistance, but are woefully outnumbered. Their only relief, Randyll Tarly, is kept occupied by the Blackfish and Jon Royce. This leaves the isolated garrison alone and outnumbered. The walls cannot hold them back as men attack from different gates and across the wall. The only true challenge comes as the combined armies push deeper into the city itself. The Faith militants, hastily organized militias, and a few defenders rush at them, picking off enemy soldiers and forcing them to fight for every step. Robb Stark rides at the head of his force, Grey Wind snarling at his side. The sight of the direwolf is enough to scatter defenders. The Golden Company has something better though: elephants. These great beasts rush through the larger streets, crushing defenders underfoot or sweeping them aside with their trunks. Despite their fanatical resolve, the poorly trained militants are no match for Robb's hardened bannermen and Aegon's elite mercenaries. Those flattened by the elephants are the lucky ones, as the rest are hacked apart. The bells of the city begin to toll, signaling surrender. But in the heart of the Faith militant, no quarter is given. They refuse to yield, barricading themselves in the Sept of Baelor. But this defiance is short-lived as they bring forward an elephant that batters down the gates. The floors run red with blood, the air heavy with the scent of incense and death. Grey Wind leaps into the High Sparrow's chamber, crushing the man's throat in his powerful jaws, as Jon Connington finishes the High Sparrow himself. With the city taken, Cersei is captured and executed, though her new champion, Robert Strong, kills many warriors before he's crushed under an elephant. The two kings begin a long negotiation process that ends with Robb being allowed to remain king in the north, but acting as a client kingdom whose foreign policy is decided by Aegon. Meanwhile, the rest of the Seven Kingdoms quickly yield to Aegon's rule after seeing the power of his armies. The remaining sparrows are forced to either yield or die across the Seven Kingdoms, as Aegon outlaws them again. Here the Northmen lead the charge, rounding them up and sending them back to where they came. That's our theory. Westeros is a land filled with exciting stories and possibilities, and we love exploring them. If you want to accompany us on this journey across the Seven Kingdoms and beyond, then please like, share, and subscribe to our channel.